Radical is a word that is bandied around a lot, particularly in personal development circles. But what does it really mean? For me, I interpret radical as being relative. What is a small step for one person is potentially a huge step for another person. It is a very individual process. Ironically, though, it is through this individual process of radical change that we're going to bring about collective change. So it begins with us, it begins with you, and it begins with me. I see radical change as being something that takes us onto a new trajectory, not another step on the path that we're already on, even if that feels like it's a very big step. It's giving ourselves permission to step onto a completely different path, a different trajectory, and and consciously choosing that over continuing the path that we have already been taking. And the other aspect of that is that it is diverging from the norms and the expectations of others and of yourself. So it's really giving yourself permission to do something that you would otherwise be hesitant to do, or you would have your reservations about. So radical change for me is a departure from the norm. It is a departure from the expectations that you've probably grown up with and that you've worked with in your adult life, but also the expectations of society, because in order to change society, of course, we need to actually diverge from what already exists. Radical change is really, really important at this time. We're in a time of individual transformation and collective transition. And we need to shake out the stuckness. We need to find different ways of doing things. And it's going to the necessary environmental, cultural, social, economic, and behavioral change that we need to see in the world is going to come from the individuals, from individuals taking specific action to radically change the way that they operate. Now, for me, my focus is around how people change the way that they're operating in business and how then business can contribute to collective change. And that's what we're all in the business of. It is bringing about collective change through our businesses. The opening of this process is releasing the bind of the old. It is coming into an acceptance that the old can move on, that you do not need to carry it with you any longer. And we feel that initially through deep discomfort. And I think we can all say that we have been feeling a great deal of discomfort in recent times. So that shaking out is the first stage. It's like the giving ourselves the green light to let go of. But that might be beliefs, it might be particular patterns of behavior that we have, actions that we've been taking, or just simply the perspective that we need to be approaching something from a particular angle. By giving ourselves permission to just put that to one side or just not have as strong a hold on it, then we are actually putting ourselves in a place where we are we're coming into a place where radical change is a possibility. And one of the reasons that it is so important to really let the old go now is that it's a capacity issue. We have a lot of clutter, an energetic clutter, practical clutter as well, that is related to the old. And when we have that in place, there's no capacity to receive the new. But even if we do manage to receive the new or part of it, then we haven't got the space within our field, within our environment, to be able to acknowledge and appreciate it. It's because it's hidden within all of the clutter. So removing that is a key part of the process that we need to go through in order to enact change. And it's something that has been very evident in entrepreneurial circles throughout the end of 2020 and into 2021. There's a lot of people are feeling a very deep need to declutter and remove a lot of thoughts and beliefs and processes and systems, and also their environment as well, just completely doing a deep clean in order to make space for what's coming. It's going to be so important that we put some time and effort into reconsidering and reframing the concepts of risk and fear. Now, I'm not saying that we should move completely away from the idea of risk. You know, it can be completely uh, wild and abandoned and take all the risks that we you know we can, nor should there necessarily not be any fear involved in that, but we need to reframe our relationship with them, because where we've come from, it has been a fairly debilitating relationship with risk and fear, and we need to use those in a very positive way moving forward. One of the ways I think that we can do that is by reframing it, the problem, as an opportunity for finding a playful solution, because it's going to be through play, and taking and experimenting, which in our probably in our existing frame of reference is taking a risk, that we are going to be able to find new and innovative solutions to what we're doing and what we want to do. So when we feel that we are presented with a risk, we need to challenge that and say, you know, is that real? What would happen if it were real, and what would happen if it weren't real? And for us to actually think about why do we think of that as a risk? Where do those beliefs come from? And then also with the fear aspect of it, to ask ourselves, where do those fears originate? Because they may not be from us. They may be something that we're holding socially. It may have come from our families. It may come just from osmosis of what's going on around us. So if we actually get into the habit of questioning our responses to perceived risk and fear, then we're going to be in a much better place to actually move beyond them in order to bring radical change into action. And let's just say that some of those fears really or risks stand out for you. Another question that we need to ask ourselves is, are they valid? Because some of them will be valid. You know, some of the fears and risks that we have are very valid. Now, they may then say, you know, that this is not a path that you can take, or they may say, okay, your response to them might be that you need to find a way to work with it or around it, because there's a lot that is going to come to us, and be open to it. You can do ways of working with those fears and risks. And you may need to consider how to manage that risk safely, and you may need to how to mitigate the risk, or how to move around it completely. There's lots of things that we can work with, but we need to be conscious of where those risks have come from and our perception of them, and where those fears have come from and our perception of them, so that we can work constructively with a natural defense mechanism to the process of creating change, because all change creates a degree of resistance, because we know where we are now, and as uncomfortable as it may be, it doesn't mean to say that we're not uncomfortable with the unknown. And if we're uncomfortable with the unknown, we won't move into it, because at least it's better the devil you know. But that's not really going to serve us in business. It's not going to serve us in life moving forward. We need to be making significant changes, and so there's a degree of bravery and courage that comes with that in tackling fear and risk. And the other aspect then we need to look at is enactment, because there's a big difference between being ready for change and enacting change. A lot of people are ready for change on the surface, but their ability to act upon that is something else altogether. So we really need to be leaning into our readiness to enact change at any level, let alone radical change. And when we can do that, then we are putting ourselves in a better position to begin the process in earnest. So there are some key phases of change. The first is really unconscious readiness for change. So it's when you can feel that there's something that isn't right. You know that something's not right, but you haven't got a clue what it is. That's your unconscious phase. And then there's another phase, which is your conscious phase of the need for change. You know what needs to change, but you don't know how. So these are the two hurdles that we're going to have to get over if we want to actually act upon the need for change. So you can be willing to see change, and you can be ready to see change, because you know about those levels of discomfort. You're uncomfortable, but you don't know what, or you know what, but you don't know how. That level of discomfort can be there, but you still then got to be willing to act upon it. And that's the key that I want to be talking about in this video. With the enactment of change, the movement into change, any movement towards change, let alone into change, is going to bring you right up against some beliefs and patterns of behavior that have you in a holding pattern, that you are going to butt up against, or they're going to present obstacles for you, or it might show up as resistance, or it may just be a very practical barrier that you face, because of something that's been put into place in order to hold you in those old patterns. And that can seem, when you're in that, it can seem incredibly overwhelming. It can seem like a mountain you cannot possibly traverse. But if we can begin to turn our gaze to those patterns, to those beliefs, to those thoughts, then we are open to the process of enacting radical change. But no one can act upon the need for radical change without embracing their fire energy. Cultivating fire energy is the key to radical change, because that fire energy is what gives us the strength to navigate risk and fear. It gives us, and that can be very much on a practical level, but it also can be on a very internal level, in terms of how we feel about ourselves, how strong and confident we feel about talking about what we need to do. So there's a lot of need for fire, and embracing fire has been a constant message over the last few months of 2020 and into 2021. It has been embrace your fire, find your fire, activate your fire, hold your fire, move through the fire to get to your new version, your new iteration of you, your new iteration of what you're here to do, to embrace a much deeper level of purpose. So the fire energy is quite playful. It isn't really intense in the way that we have perceived it in the past. It is really quite playful, but it is also quite tasking, because it is asking you to really step into a new identity before you've built your new identity. It's asking you to get rid of your external structures while you're still building new internal structures. And what I mean by that is that we quite often build systems and processes and environments around ourselves, belief systems as well, that support us in our identity. And yet, for us to enact radical change, we have to get rid of, I'm not saying you have to completely burn down your entire life and get rid of everything in your life, but we have to let go of the hold of what we've created in order to find the new. And that can be, we can feel incredibly unanchored. We can feel just, fuzzy around the edges, really uncomfortable, really, it can be quite scary. We're just not attached, we're not anchored into anything, can feel that way. But whereas we need to be building our internal structures that actually support our own energy flow. So instead of anchoring ourselves into what is outside of us, we are anchoring ourselves into energetic structures within. And that's around our thought beliefs and processes, and our assessment of risk and fear, and all of those things that I've been talking about are part of us creating energetic structures internally, so that we have the ability to completely dismantle what we have created in order to create something new. Holding your energy and being able to be present in that energy and share that energy comes down to your activation of your fire. And it's in this embracing of our fire that we can really give ourselves the freedom to be to embrace the full extent of our creative abilities and our ability to make change. Remember that what we're doing as individuals now is making big levels of change individually because it is facilitating collective change. So our own personal transformation is the key to collective global change. And we resist change at any level because we are, we are built to consider the risks and to respond to the risks, not to take unnecessary risks. So moving into massive change is not something that we are going to run and leap into unless we have embraced our fire, and let alone radical change, really taking big steps of change. Then that's not something we can do unless we have embraced our fire. So once we are channeling our fire energy, then that's not to stay in it all the time. That's another topic. But once you're able to channel your fire energy, then you're able to move into a space of taking radical action. But there are some questions that we can ask to really get to understand where you are in that space for, are you ready to take change, or are you on the cusp of actually taking that change? And what are you going to come up against when you do that? So if you are in the unconscious stage, when you are ready for change, but you really don't know what it is that's wrong, all you can feel is the discomfort, then some very simple questions to ask yourself, what feels uncomfortable? What are you doing when that sensation of discomfort comes up? And how is it manifesting? Just some simple inquiry around that will start to point you in the right direction. And once you have got your focus on what it is, then you're going to move into the conscious phase, because you'll be able to see it, and then you'll be able to look at, okay, well, I know that needs to change. Then you move into yeah, but how? So if you're consciously ready for change, but you're stuck at the I don't know what to do and how to make it happen stage, then this is where the energy can be really, really valuable to you. So ask yourself in a reflective state, not just, in a mental state, because you're not going to get this in a mental state. It needs to be in a space of reflection. Ask yourself what the energy of the new feels like. Just literally, all you need to do is call it in. And when you've got that, just look at how it compares to where you're at now. What's the difference? Because what that's going to give you is, how do you need to move from, what are your steps to begin to move from here to there? And it is much easier than you think. When you break it down, you just go, okay, well, that feels like this, and this, and my current situation feels like this. So, and you can just ask yourself for that first step. You do know this. You have the ability to find that first step. And the other question that you can ask yourself is, how does your current situation need to shift? What is it, a specific thing that needs to shift in order to accommodate the new one? And then when we're talking about your desire for change, which is, you may have desire for change is a complex one, because we're multi-layered, and we may be ready mentally, but we may not be ready at any other level, or we may be ready at an energetic level, we may be ready at a mental level, we may not be ready emotionally. There's all sorts of things that may be coming into play with that. So we're complex beings. But when it comes to a desire for change, questions that we can ask ourselves, when we hit resistance, how can we, the question to ask yourself is, how can I justify this belief or this behavior? So really challenge yourself to explore a different perspective, and challenge yourself to create a case for the opposing view, so that you are really putting your debating skills into action here, that you are justifying, because you're saying you're ready for change, but then you've got this belief that is in the way. So task yourself to try and justify it. And then when you finish that, am I convinced by that? Am I persuaded that that's actually the reality of the situation? As simple as that. Put those time-honored debating skills to the test on yourself, and see how you fare and see what you think at the end of it. So navigating those questions, navigating that willingness to be part of a movement of change through your own experience, is where we come around to the enactment of radical change. And it's not going to be comfortable. It just isn't. It's just that it's necessary. We need to move into spaces of being uncomfortable. We need to actively create space for chaos. We need to actively engage and participate in the dismantling, because we need to be on board with that. We're never going to create the level of change that we need to see, or the level of action that we need to take, unless we really challenge ourselves to dismantle what's been going on, and just see the patterns of our behavior, see the way that we've been operating in particular ways, and how that's contributed to where we've been, and so we can let go of it and just feel our way forward, in the dark, so to speak, listening to our intuition, listening to our inner guidance and our inner wisdom, and listening to those prompts, subtle, nuanced prompts that we're constantly getting. So finding our way to listen deeply and trust that what's coming through is, and what we're feeling, what we're sensing, is accurate and in our best interests, and be willing to get that uncomfortable, be willing to test, experiment, and play our way through into something else. Now, it's like, what it feels like to me is that, the new that is already in us, is already there, is just sort of like masked by the old, and all we need to do is just like wriggle and jiggle a little bit, and then we can just shake it off, and it's just going to fall off, and we're going to come back to the reality, the knowing of our full potential and what we are here to create.